It all started actually with Jean Baker Miller's book in 1976, Toward a New Psychology of Women, which was at that time that it came out really a revolutionary book. That it was a small book, it was had a pink cover, it looked very non-threatening, but it really was about turning a lot of psychological theory on its head, particularly when it came to an understanding of women, girls and women. So Jean wrote her book in 1976. In 1978, she moved from New York to Boston, and she was looking for a group of colleagues to share cases, talk ideas. And through a mutual acquaintance, I was invited to attend this group of 4 people. And we had no big idea at the time. We all felt we were working in hospital settings, educational settings. We all felt that the theory that was put forward as describing women's development and women's psychology was off base and didn't fit with our understanding. But initially, just getting together, trying to support one another in these very patriarchal institutions that we were part of. In 1981, we'd been meeting for several years, just informally in Jean's living room beneath a lovely old quilt that we imagined had been put together by a group of women who were wanting to create something together. After a few years of meeting there, Jean decided that, and it really was Jean decided, that we had something to say that should go beyond the walls of her living room. So she asked us if we would be willing to sign on to do a conference in Toronto. It was an orthopsychiatry conference. It was an organization that Jean belonged to and was respected by. At the time, I was completely, utterly phobic about speaking in public. I barely opened my mouth in graduate school. I was very uneasy about it. And when Jean asked us if we would do this, I said that I'd be happy to write a paper for this convention in Toronto, but I really wasn't going to be able to present it, that perhaps Jean could present the paper that I wrote. And Jean looked at me in her stern way, and she said, Judy, this is literal about voice. You have to use your voice. You have to speak up. And so I agreed very reluctantly. I did a small paper on empathy in the mother-daughter relationship. We all got together to travel up to Toronto. I was sitting in the back of the plane by myself because I was still trying to get the material under my control and trying to understand and trying to figure out what I was going to say. And my colleagues were in the front of the plane laughing and talking, and I could hear them, and they're having a wonderful time. I'm sweating. So we finally we fly up to Toronto. We get there and I say, well, okay, maybe nobody will show up for this conference or symposium or whatever you want to call it. And of course, Jean had an international reputation already. So there were probably about 600 to 800 people at this talk that we were giving. And I gave my talk on empathy in the mother-daughter relationship, sat down in really a pool of sweat. I was just exhausted and done in from this effort of speaking in public. But I had forgotten about the question and answer period. So a man comes to the microphone at the end of this very large hall, and he says, I'd like to ask a question, Dr. Jordan. What are the implications of empathy for Marxist and capitalist systems of government? Yeah. I looked at Irene Stiver was on one side, Jan Surrey on the other. I looked at them, my mouth fell open. I probably dissociated. And I said, that's a very interesting question. Very interesting question. I'm sure you have some thoughts on it. And of course, I had given my, 10-minute talk on empathy and the mother-daughter relationship, and he proceeded to give a 20-minute talk on Marxism and capitalism and empathy. At the time, by the way, I'm not proud of this. I thought it was an off-the-wall question. I now think it was a very important question. And this is really a bit about the whole story of this theory and the way it's evolved, is it really started off being about therapy, about one-on-one relationships, about changing models of therapy. But actually, when you start to say, relationship, connection, empathy, mutuality are the center of human growth. You really are entering into a kind of, I'll call it revolutionary, but you're entering into a real plea for basic core change. And that's really where the theory has gone. I mean, we now have your work in education. We have Maureen's wonderful work on racism and power differentials. We have Amy's work on this neurobiology of connection. But it started with just a group of 4 women. Became 5 women for a while and then back to 4. But it started with a group of 4 women saying, this theory isn't speaking for me, the old theory. The new theory captures my experience. Jean, when we went out to do presentations, which I did for a good 30 years, Jean, I mean, people would come up to her and say, your book changed my life. And her book really has over time, and the relational cultural theory that evolved out of that work has really made a difference, certainly in the world of therapy. It's been very, quote, assimilated. Sometimes that's not so good because we're not given proper credit for what we contributed, but at least the ideas, the thoughts, the change is there and is getting recognized by the field. I think it was, I don't know how many years ago now it was, but the APA put out a series of books on psychotherapy, and they said they were starting with the 10 most important, there you go, advertisement, the 10 most important theories in this country, and they included RCT as one of them. Going from living room to conference in Toronto to many, many conferences, very, very much of an underground kind of transmission. There was a big article in the Boston Globe that was sent from place to place so people could have access to some of the ideas. And we did that partly because the traditional way of going through journal articles and peer-reviewed articles typically doesn't go to the fringe, doesn't go to the outside edge of things. So we decided to do our own colloquium, our own publication. We now have over 110 publications, works in progress. That's very important too. These were never considered the theory. They were always considered works in progress. And that's very much about Jean's humility and her sense of, we're not claiming big things here. We're just claiming that this is something that has been misunderstood and it needs to be corrected. And that's what we did. Now, originally, we were working mostly with women. We are considered a feminist theory. But we also now believe that a lot of the changes that we suggested apply to boys and men very importantly. And that if you're going to make real change in the culture around the issue of, are we raised to be autonomous, independent, separate, or are we raised to be connected and mutual and attending to mutual benefit? That really does, if you go from there to there, it really changes the picture enormously. Mm-hmm. So that's the history. The history was then Jean became director of the Stone Center at Wellesley. We started the colloquy series. We started the writing. We've written now, I don't know how many books, probably 15. 15 books, 100 works in progress, and many, many journal articles that are based in RCT.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I wanted to go back a bit. I wanted to go back to that those living room meetings. Yes. I wonder if you could tell me, do you remember any stories, or if you could tell me sort of what those meetings were like how were you working together, and how did that work start to become a theory?
Yeah, well, it did start off with just looking for support, which, isn't often recognized as a very important thing to be able to do in life, because we're supposed to exist without needing support or depending on people. That's the traditional theory. But we did start off just with the notion of helping each other become more confident, more able to go out into the world after the initial period when we were just really working with therapy and trying to change the model of therapy. But I'll tell you 2 stories that I think capture a little bit the feeling of the beginning. One is that we did meet in that living room for many years. It was very precious to all of us. We met initially every other week. We went occasionally to every week. We did a big conference with the Harvard Medical School that was an every other year conference that reached many thousands of people, actually. So at one meeting, we decided that it would be lovely to have a fire in the fireplace in Jean's living room beneath the quilt. And so we got our matches out and we started a fire, and pretty soon we started coughing and we started kind of sputtering, and we hadn't really put together what was going on, but actually we had not opened the flue. So there we were, so intense on our conversation that we didn't even really notice the smoke that was filling the living room. And that gives you some sense of the intensity. And similarly, another story like that is we were taking a trip together, the four of us, to do a conference. And we were sitting at the gate area of the airport where our plane was going to take off. And we're sitting there, we're talking. And pretty soon we noticed there's nobody else around us in the gate. And the plane had left. They had announced it. We had been talked right on through it, and the plane went off without us. So intensity, focus. Many people asked us, did you do a lot of processing in your group? But, psychologists like to do group processing. So no, we did very little, actually. And that may be a reason for critiquing us in certain ways. But in other ways, there was such an intense focus on the work, the ideas, making a difference. And I would say that all of us held that kind of intensity of passion. And I still hold it, even in these dark times. I still feel that if we can really start to pay attention to and value good connection, growth fostering connection, as Jean talked about, we can help heal the world, and it needs healing badly, perhaps more now than it did back in 1978 when we were doing our original work. It's just, we have just lived through kind of the worst example of the separate self, me, narcissism, thinking about me, not the common good. And this model is a lot about creating the common good, contributing to the common good, and about mutual benefit. Not one person looking down at another and either controlling or whatever. It's about really contributing to community, building community, supporting people's desire to connect with others. If you think about it, when we're in fear, really the natural reaction to fear is to reach out for comfort. We know that from lots and lots of experiments. If you create fear in people and then mock them for reaching out for comfort, you can shame them into silence, you can control people.
Okay. I'd like to keep sticking with the history for a while, and because I think there's a lot here, and we can maybe do some other conversations where we get into some of the other stuff. But
okay.
But this is great, and I want to stick with it. So I want to again go back to the living room, and work together, and I guess I wonder if you can remember, again, sort of how did you move into developing this as a theory? So was it sort of, were people taking notes and starting to write papers? Was it, collaborative idea generation and just sort of recording that for a while? Or sort of how did it really go from this consultation and support to we're building a theory here?
That's a good question. And again, just to remind you, Jean never thought we were building a theory. She thought we were writing works in progress and just noting where there were insufficiencies. So for her, I remember very clearly when she was at a big conference once and she was talking about not wanting to be sure we adhered to the work in progress notion and that it wasn't a theory, that we didn't have enough to have a theory. And some woman with I don't know, anyway, she was at the way back of the room and she said, you have a theory. You have enough for a theory. And Jean is sitting kind of being very true to her principles as she was. and saying, well, let's not call it a theory, because then we get codification, we get kind of stuck, and stuck with labels or boxes that we don't want to get into. So, but how it evolved into, I mean, it really was about taking ourselves seriously. And I think Jean was also, again, a very important person in that regard, is that she really believed that we were saying something that needed to be heard. And she really, with this conference in Toronto, she really started the model of let's go out and speak. Let's go, and the thing that was wonderful was, because this resonated with so many people. I mean, so many therapists said, I knew this all along, but I couldn't state it. I felt like I didn't have any backing with it. It wasn't written in books, but this is the way I've been doing therapy. I mean, Jean supported our moving beyond that, moving into something bigger. And that conference in Toronto was the beginning of that. So we had lots and lots of requests. Mm-hmm. We went out a lot. In one year I did 52 presentations around the country. I mean, I was doing them every single week, and I loved it. I'm now a bit exhausted from it, but I loved doing it. I loved the fact that we were representing an experience that a lot of women had that they hadn't felt was legitimate or valid. So it started really with speaking. 1982, Carol Gilligan wrote her paper in a different voice. I've talked elsewhere about the importance of using a model of voice rather than self, because it's less structured, it's less spatialized, it really represents the kind of fluidity with, we are listened into voice. Voice is a dialogic phenomenon. Self is a material metaphor. Here's the self. It's inside this bag of skin. This Boston Globe article that came out by Chris Robb, I don't remember what year it was. I think it was 8. I don't know. Don't remember. I have it up there on the wall. I could probably go look. Anyway, that article came out and it got passed around. It got 0. I mean, people told us this, that they just made hundreds of copies and sent it to all their friends. So I would say there was resonance. And that resonance partly included a lot of respect for the experience of people who were saying it isn't about gaining autonomy and separation and independence and being phobic about dependence and need. It's really about building growth, fostering connections. And Jean talked about the 5 good things about in those: zest, creativity. What are some of the others now? I'm blanking on them. Creativity, zest, more connection. What?
Movement, worth.
Movement, yeah, movement, change. So it's something shifting rather than static. Mm-hmm. So I don't remember what your question was.
No, that's good. That's good. So I wonder, just one more question to sort of maybe go back to that living room. I'm sort of interested in what, as you look back on it, what you were all, I mean, I sort of imagine that it was very collaborative, and so much of what emerged from that collaboration. But I wonder, you've talked about some of the things that Jean certainly brought to that in her leadership. And I wonder if there's anything else that stands out for you that Jean in particular brought to that, and then what the rest of you each brought to that, if you remember distinctive sort of perspectives or areas or ways of working.
It's an interesting question, because in a way, the work was incredibly collaborative. And I would say there were times when we actually didn't know who had come up with some new concept first. Not that we were in competition for first place on any of the concepts, but it was collaborative. It was also individual. I mean, we would go off and work on our papers, and then we'd bring them back to the group. I mean, we were doing a lot of working, mostly for presentations. Mm-hmm. So that was the way we were building, is each one of those works in progress was a presentation that had been given at the at the Stone Center. I mean, I think we had distinctive contributions. Jean, of course, gave kind of the overall kind of push for big change. Irene was a consummate clinician, she would, when we were talking cases, which often were part of the papers that we wrote, Irene had wonderful insights. Jan Surrey was always ready to jump in and sort of start a new group to get something happening. Jean once referred to me as the group's intellectual, which I was both awed by and horrified by. But anyway, I mean, I think we brought different pieces to the table. And I think none of this would have happened again. I don't want to say Jean was, I mean, she was bigger than the rest of us in certain ways, but she really was the one who had the faith. But I can remember one meeting particularly when we were each of us in a kind of a place of doubt about whether we had anything to contribute. And I remember us all kind of um, talking about some of our feeling like we weren't doing enough, or what were doing maybe wasn't the thing that needed to be done. And I just remember looking around the room, in that living room that you've brought me back to, and thinking, you know, these are incredible women, and they are voicing this self-doubt in a way that I felt also. And I thought that's really such a sign of how silenced, how doubting, how shamed we were for believing in a model that was very different from existing models. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's, I think it's part of the journey for a lot of people when they're doing their creative and intellectual work, right? So whether it's, a master's student writing a first big paper, a doctoral student working on a dissertation, any of us who continue to write after graduate school and present and so on, I think we have those moments, many of us anyway. And I think to share that this group had those moments as well,
Yeah.
and
And
put it in that context.
the other piece I want to say is that one of the things that happened with our group was, because people found the model and us so compelling, was there was a tendency to idealize. And I've had to say to people often, don't imagine this was a perfect union here. We had our moments, we had our differences, we hurt each other occasionally. We didn't get things right. And I think that, that was very important to try to present that. And I think we all have to try to be humble. Um, yeah.
Well, it seems also like all of it, given the essence of the theory, it's not a theory that could have been developed by one person, right?
Yeah.
Because that wouldn't align with the theory itself. And also the fact that, as you're saying, the group wasn't perfect, because no group's perfect, no family's perfect, no,
Right.
couple. I mean, all relationships have complexity, and we've talked about how sometimes people take a first glance at the theory and see it as very lightweight,
Yes.
and just sort of like, let's all hold hands and get along, and there's much more
Yes.
to it than that. And so I think you sharing that even in that original working group, there were tensions and there were,
Of
moments
course.
of conflict is, I appreciate the sort of transparency of that, because again, I think it reflects the theory itself,
Yeah.
that in relationship we need to learn how to deal with conflict
We
and
do. I mean,
engage in.
Jean would say, and did say, although we never, any of us really completely explored conflict. I think we went towards it and then we back off a little bit. But I think Jean would say there's no growth without conflict,
Mhm.
and there's no growth without uncertainty. And there's no growth if you're not moved out of your comfort zone. So all of those were important.
Yeah. Okay. So continuing to think about the history, but maybe moving beyond, a little bit beyond the living room, you talked about how you experienced a lot of resonance. So when you started to take the work out, there were many, many people for whom this work um, really put language to sort of maybe intuition they had about their practice and their lives and so on. So I would imagine that was energizing for you all.
Absolutely. I mean, it was I mean, I would go to these conferences, and the sense that I was learning and growing from the people there, and being fortified, particularly in the days when it was a struggle to get this model accepted. I mean, you're right. There was this kind of tendency to move in the direction of, oh, this is just warm and fuzzy and unclear thinking, and it's not, doesn't have any data to back it and all of that. Um, but yeah,
So that really helped you along.
it did. I think it sustained us, and it really did right up until the end when we were still going around to do it. We're not doing that, of course. This year we haven't been able to do that, but we do have that. You're doing that now, Harriet, and Maureen's doing it, Amy's doing it. I mean, we're still getting the word out, but for now, of course, it's been stifled a bit by the pandemic.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I think that that belief that we continue to develop the work through sharing the work, again, aligns with the theory itself, right?
Yes, yes.
That we can only deepen the work when we engage with others around the work
Yeah,
itself.
absolutely. That's the way things develop and grow and move.
Yeah.
But through that and get that mutual engagement where it's not one person giving to the other or getting from the other, but it really is kind of it's a model of mutual benefit, which there's been some written about mutuality and the importance of it in terms of power arrangements.
Mhm.
But I think that mutual benefit is so important that it's not about altruism. It's not about, kind of sacrificing yourself in order to give to the other. It's very much finding the places where you both grow and you both gain
Mhm.
sustenance, new ideas, whatever.
Mhm. Yeah, very good. Well, I'm hoping we'll have a later conversation about mutuality and mutual empathy. Um, but
Fine.
along with the resonance that you experienced, I'm aware that you also faced a lot of resistance, right? You had,
Yes.
there were a lot of, so say more about that if you would.
Well, I often joke about, when a new theory comes along, first of all, people don't hear it, they don't listen to it. Then they hear it and they say, this is dangerous. This is dangerous theory, which we got to. And then they say the next step is we knew it all along. So it's sort of a lose-lose position. But yes, I was working in the time when we started this, I was working in a Harvard teaching hospital, very patriarchal. And I was the director of training in psychology for a number of years. And my students often came there to get the RCT model. They'd get there, and many of the staff, many of the senior people would be putting them down and putting the model down. And so one of the painful parts of this actually was initially watching the students try to hold on what they felt was a truer picture of humanity and human nature, and getting this feedback from their other supervisors that this was not worth spending any energy on. In fact, again, the notion of it could be dangerous. If you're talking about mutuality in psychotherapy, that's going to hurt people. Clients are going to feel like they have to take care of their therapist, which was ridiculous. And Jean often used to talk about a very intentional misunderstanding that was going on of the model that made it like, don't do that, that's going to hurt the person. Or so yes, there was pushback, and very slowly there was an assimilation into textbooks. There's a major undergraduate textbook that has a chapter on our work alongside of Freud and Jung and all those folks, and it became more respected over time. Although some people I imagine still think of it as a little bit lightweight.
Mhm. And was it difficult to get journal articles published initially, or?
Well, the very first experience we had was a paper that Irene Stiver wrote for, there's a purple journal called this, I think it's just Psychotherapy, I don't remember now. But she wrote an article and she got back the critique like, you can't use the word I. It's all supposed to be objective and scientific. So rather than fight with that journal, we said, let's go write our own. This is actually part of what happened with Works in Progress. I mean, there was the colloquium, which was a speaking presentation, and then the Works in Progress, which came a little bit later. Maybe they started out pretty soon at the beginning. But anyway, there was the Works in Progress, which was to say, and then the books, which was to say, this is legitimate. And that is what many people were very grateful for. They said, I knew this in my heart, but I felt I couldn't practice this way because it wasn't legitimized by the mainstream psychotherapies.
Yeah. So, and for folks watching who aren't familiar with Works in Progress, so this is a series of papers that were put out by the Jean Baker Miller Training Institute, I guess often based on presentations that have been given through various programs, but also I imagine sometimes people just wrote other papers as well, but they all sort of went through this process of being, I imagine, reviewed and so on by your core group, and then they were put out as these works in progress so that practitioners and scholars could access that, and that was a way to get the work out there, particularly before you were able to get going in the journal world as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't know, I mean, I don't know, we are represented fairly well in referee journals at this point in time, but in the beginning, there wasn't a lot of interest.
Yeah. Now we see, I mean, a lot of journal articles, dissertations, and so on. So we see
a lot
of the work outcome continuing in that way.
It's one thing I do want to just say quickly, which was a very important thing that happened in the group at some point. We were going women's voices, the voice of women, the voice of woman, whatever. And about a couple of years into the model, we were confronted with a group of women of color who basically said, you think there's one voice for women, and we don't see our voices represented in the model that you're building. And I mean, it was totally, it was an awful and necessary realization that they were absolutely right, and that we had to do something pretty darn quick. And we were repeating the same error that we said men had misrepresented women, and just lumped them all together. So that was very painful and very, very necessary and very important. And we did some, we did some corrective kinds of things around it, but but it was big.
A real turning point. And also, I think, from what I understand, maybe also pushed the leadership group to think about what other voices had been excluded up until that point.
Exactly. Yeah.
So thinking more about social
it
class.
happened.
Yeah. Social class, sexual orientation.
Exactly. I mean, all that was kind of like, oh my God, what are we doing? So just wanted to be sure that got in the history, because it's not the best place of our history, but we did listen. And we did try to shift things.
Yeah. That seems like a real turning point. As you look back, can you think of any other particular turning points or shifts or moments of realization that were particularly important?
I can't think of any right off the bat. I mean, obviously, one of the things about that group was that it was intergenerational. It was Jean, Irene, Jan, and me. Sandy Kaplan was there for a while, but was not there for long. But it was an intergenerational. Jean and Irene both were of an generation up, and that meant we had to deal with their dying, which was a turning point and a difficult point for us to lose these two women, both as friends and colleagues, and then trying to sort of figure out how we were going to carry the work forward, which we did. And you had asked about the Jean Baker Miller Training Institute. We did bring the work to a lot of people through that institute, which was housed at Wellesley for many years. Trying to think of other turning points. I mean, nothing pops.
Okay.
It was a lot of the change was more sort of gradual, and yeah. Finally, I really want to invite as many of you as interested into this work. There's lots more to do. It isn't all done by a long shot. We're still mapping out new regions. We're still making a difference in the world. And I would just invite you all to join us if you're so inclined. If this model gives you any degree of validation and feeling better about the work you're doing, wonderful. That makes me very, very happy. But join us. Come and teach with us, dialogue with us, help us learn things that we're not paying attention to, that we need to pay attention to. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think there is a lot of passion to do that work. And if you can dip into that and use it for your own development or for the development of your organizations or your context, great.